There were no two people who looked as alike as Jonas and Jerry. The twins were identical, save for the birthmarks that identified each of them. Jonas had a flower birthmark on his right arm, while Jerry, funny enough, had the very same one on his left arm. Also, as they grew up, their personalities were so distinct. Jonas was highly extroverted. He enjoyed meeting and socializing with new people from different places, and because of that, it was really easy for him to make friends. Jerry, on the other hand, was an introvert. He was very reserved and enjoyed spending time by himself, tending to his hobbies. The two boys were the only children of their parents, and theirs was a typical grass to grace story. They were born in one of the poorest regions of their country. Everybody there dreamt of going to the city for better opportunities, and so most children worked hard in school, aiming to go to university in the city, where exposure to better life opportunities was greater. For those that did not make it out of school, the alternative would be to find minimum wage work in the bigger towns, usually as domestic workers. It was by purpose and design that Jonas and Jerry's parents had only the two of them. You see, with just the two, their parents felt their sacrifices toward a better future for their children would make better sense, so they worked hard and sacrificed their hard-earned money to help push them as far as they could. Fortunately for their parents, Jonas and Jerry were good kids who never got into any trouble and always gave the best towards their education. And eventually, they managed to go to the university in the city. And to top it all off, they did so on government scholarships. Their parents were delighted and felt they had accomplished their mission. Things could only look up for them from here. Apart from being fully identical, the two boys were similar in that they were overachievers. They knew what school meant to them and to their parents. So they did well at every stage, and eventually they graduated from university with top honors. Their overjoyed parents threw them the mother of all celebrations. Shortly after the graduation festivities were over, they quickly got job offers in the city. Jonas got a job at one of the major accounting firms, while Jerry was employed by the country's biggest telecom company. The twins rose to heights they never thought possible, and needless to say, they did extremely well for themselves. With home always on their minds, they got to work improving their parents' situation. They bought them a big piece of property and built them a house and landscaped their yard. They also opened a local supermarket and hired their cousins to work there, with a big chunk of the proceeds being used to look after their parents' needs. Now, because of the intensity of their jobs, the twins showed up home less and less. Soon, it was 3 years since they had been home to see their parents. They kept tabs on what was happening at home through phone calls and the occasional video call. Unfortunately, their dad started to fall sick often. He had suffered a stroke, and the after effects were beginning to take a toll on him. Good enough, though, around this time, the twins made a decision to go home during the holiday season and spend 2 weeks with their parents. They had also started to feel a need to reconnect with their roots and resist the urge to forget where they came from. This was their home, and the place that had made them who they were and built for them this new world they seemed to enjoy so much. On the day they arrived home, their mother joked about them bringing the rains. From then on, it was cold mornings and even colder evenings. The nights were dark and stormy with lots of rain. Planting season was fully here. The twins found it so nostalgic to be at home during that time. They remembered how they would run through the newly planted gardens in the mornings on their way to school, and how they would sit by the fire in the evenings when it wasn't raining and listen to endless stories told to them by their beloved grandmother. They also looked forward to reconnecting with some of their old friends. Most of them had gotten jobs in the city as well, but it was so strange that they only met back at home. Their reunions were always the best. One of their friends, Maurice, owned a nightclub in town. He invited them over to come and enjoy all that it had to offer. He also had other former classmates of theirs coming through, so it was one of those reunions they all looked forward to. Maurice was a tall fellow. He had a stutter and loved a good party, and it was no surprise that he owned a nightclub. He always brought the party everywhere he went. He was good friends with Jonas and Jerry since they grew up in the same neighborhood. The twins got ready to head to the club. The town was some distance from their home, and the drive there had a stretch of road that went over a bridge. That night was cold and very wet because the skies had opened up earlier in the afternoon. But cancelling on Maurice was definitely off the table. He would have their heads for even thinking it. They layered up and headed out to start the night's plans. Nothing was going to stop them or dampen their spirits. They got to the club about 30 minutes later. On the way there, as they drove over the bridge, Jonas commented about the time it used to wash away every season before the National Road Service made improvements to it. Home had changed quite a bit indeed. Their arrival signaled the real start of the party. Jonas enjoyed the energy. If Maurice was the life of the party, Jonas was its very soul. It's almost like he carried a certain mood and ambiance with him every time he stepped into a party zone. Jerry made a beeline to the pool table to show his old friends that he hadn't lost his hand at their favorite teenage pastime. After a while, he moved on to the darts board and passed the time with his quieter mates. Maurice and Jonas filled the club with so much energy that got the place buzzing. They launched the jukebox and took over the karaoke session. Soon, everyone was waiting their turn to perform. This guy's energy was that infectious. It was truly a fun night. People took to dancing and toasting. They were excited about how far they had come, and it was fun for everybody, reconnecting and meeting new people, sharing ideas and giving insights to different things in life and business. At around 4 a.m., the twins decided to call it a night. They wanted to get back home before dawn. After saying their goodbyes and making false promises about meeting more frequently while in the city, it was time to go. For all his energy, Jonas was worn out. Jerry just wanted to get into his bed and sleep. He was spent as well. They got into their car and got on their way home. It had rained heavily throughout the night and was still pouring well into the morning. Heavy torrents of rain made visibility almost impossible and driving a potential nightmare. As usual, Jonas hopped into the driver's seat. It was not like Jerry would anyway. He hated driving for some reason. Jonas had cranked up the music in the car. He claimed it charged him up. He drove a little too fast for someone who had quite a lot of fun and could not see far ahead of him due to the situation with the weather. By this time, Jerry was already drifting into sleep. When they approached a certain section of the bridge, Jonas slammed the brakes suddenly, but it was too late. He had not seen the horror ahead of him. The car came to a halt and it began to take on a life of its own. Jonas yelled and hit Jerry's side to wake him up. "Jerry, wake up! The bridge was washed away. The car is in the bloody river." In panic, Jerry got up and he could not believe what he was seeing. They tried to open the doors, but they could not budge. The car was slowly descending into the fierce waters of the river. It was like the river was infuriated about something and had engaged full destruction mode. The car was being tossed about like some toy. The twins felt around for the windows in the hope they would break them and escape out of the car to give themselves some sort of fighting chance, but it was all in vain. Their car had suddenly become a death trap, a signal that their end was not far off. As they felt the water in the shoes slowly come up their legs and then knees, Jerry, who was always the introspective one, shouted almost in resignation, "Jonas, this is it. I have always loved you, and I always will." He reached out for his brother's hand, and in that moment, Jonas stopped fighting. The realization of what was going to happen hit him, and the energetic, bubbly, restless twin rested, surrendered, and allowed for these last moments of his life to be truly spent with the person he was one with from the beginning. As the water reached their torsos and chests, the brothers held each other so tightly, and soon the car was fully submerged in the ferocious river waters. The next morning, their car was found upstream, washed up onto the riverbank. Some residents of the village saw the car and ran to see if they could rescue anybody. They found the brothers' bodies hugged tightly by their seatbelts. Rescue teams were called to the scene and they arrived to take the bodies. Seeing their parents at the morgue identifying their sons was such a sad sight. Their sons were the embodiment of all their dreams and hopes. They had given up everything to be able to give them a chance at a better life, and in an instant, all they had achieved, the good things they had accomplished, and the good station they had arrived at in life was quite literally washed away. But it was typical Jonas and Jerry to come into life together, walk it as one, and leave it all behind together still. They had done everything together from the moment they were born, and now all that was left was not one, but two deep dark holes that nothing could possibly ever fill.